apples were cut open by this woman, yet she never ate a single one of them. Instead, she threw them all away. It turns out she only wanted the seeds. Sometime earlier, her daughter had been assaulted and tortured by 4 young men. But when the case finally reached court, all 4 of them walked free after bribing the judge. Realizing that the law was no longer on her side, and no longer on her daughter's side either, the woman began planning her revenge against the men who had destroyed her child's life. She deliberately collected a huge number of apple seeds to make cyanide poison. Then she slipped into one of the attacker's homes and quietly mixed the poison into his drink. The moment he consumed it, he suddenly collapsed, went into convulsions, and was rushed to the hospital. But his condition was so severe that the doctors declared he would be permanently paralyzed for the rest of his life. As the police investigated the case, all signs began pointing toward the second attacker. Officers raided his house and found cut apples, along with internet searches about making cyanide from apple seeds. Without realizing they were being manipulated, the police immediately arrested him, believing he was the one behind it all. But long before this terrifying revenge plan began, Devki, a high school teacher, was simply living her normal life. One day while teaching in class, a male student named Mohit secretly sent a message to his classmate Arya. When Arya opened it, she found an explicit and inappropriate video. Shocked, she quickly showed it to her best friend Sapna, who reacted so loudly that the entire classroom was thrown into chaos. Devki immediately scolded both girls and ordered them out of the room for disrupting the lesson. But Sapna protested and explained that they had done nothing wrong. She then showed Devki the video Mohit had sent to Arya. The moment Devki saw it, her expression changed completely. Furious, she took Mohit's phone and threw it straight out the classroom window without hesitation. The story then shifts to Devki's life at home with her family. They are discussing Arya's idea for a family vacation to a snowy destination. During dinner, Arya asked her father, Anand, for permission to attend a Valentine's Day party that is being held far from home. Anand seems to consider it, while Devki clearly disapproves because she is worried about Arya's safety. But Arya insists on going and leaves the dinner table in frustration. A little later, Arya is on the phone with Sapna talking about the upcoming party. At that moment, Devki walks into her room carrying food and trying to care for her gently. She tells Arya that Anand has finally agreed to let her go. Even then, Arya remains cold and distant, refusing to respond warmly to Devki. The next day, Anand is getting ready to leave the country for work. Before departing, he apologizes to Devki for Arya's attitude, but Devki says she understands. Arya still cannot accept her as a mother after losing her biological mom. Just as Anand is about to leave, Arya comes over and apologizes for how she behaved the night before. Even so, she still calls Devki her teacher instead of her mother. That prompts Anand to remind her that at home, Devki is her mom, not her teacher. Arya breaks down and admits that she still cannot let go of her late mother. Not long after that, Arya's younger sister Priya comes over with Devki to say goodbye to Anand as well. After a warm farewell and one last hug, Anand finally leaves for the airport. This is where it begins. This is Mom. At another time, Devki is visited by her former student, Vara, who comes to thank her for changing her life. Vara brings some sweets as a gift, and they briefly talk about Arya before she leaves. Later, Devki offers the sweets to Arya with sincere intentions, but Arya harshly refuses and tells her to stay out of her business. She firmly reminds Devki that she is not her biological mother and continues to treat her with cold indifference. Not long after that, the night of the party finally arrives. As Arya is about to leave the house, Devki compliments her appearance, but Arya only responds briefly. At the party, Arya and her friends enjoy the music and dancing. Meanwhile, Mohit sits nearby, watching Arya with clear interest. He admits to his friend Charles that he likes her, and then tries to approach her, but Arya pushes him away. Frustrated, Mohit returns to his seat and complains. Hearing this, Charles steps in with bad intentions. He secretly mixes a drug into a drink and tries to give it to Arya. However, Arya refuses it because her attention is focused on Kabir, and the drink ends up being consumed by Sapna instead. At the same time, Sapna encourages Arya by giving her a rose, hoping she will confess her feelings to Kabir. Arya gathers the courage to approach him, only to see him being intimate with another woman. Heartbroken, she gives up and decides to go home with Sapna. But Sapna suddenly feels dizzy from the drink, forcing Arya to leave alone. Around that moment, Arya receives a call from Devki and says she will be home in about 45 minutes. Right after the call ends, 2 men suddenly attack Arya and cover her mouth. She struggles and tries to fight back. A parking attendant named Babaram appears, but instead of helping, he assists the attackers in forcing her into a car. Arya keeps resisting until one of the men silences her violently. They drive her away and eventually dump her body into a dark, filthy drainage ditch. Back at home, Devki begins to worry as Arya does not return. She calls Sapna, only to learn that Arya's not with her. Devki immediately goes to the party location to search for her daughter. She asks Arya's friends, but no one knows anything. Desperate, Devki goes to the police station to report Arya missing. However, the police dismiss her concerns and assume Arya simply left with a boyfriend. Devki insists that Arya would never disappear without saying anything, but they still do not take her seriously. She leaves behind Arya's photo and phone number before walking out, completely devastated. Outside the station, a mysterious man named Dayas Shankar Kapoor, also known as DK, approaches her. He is a private investigator with an unusual appearance but sharp instincts. DK offers to help find Arya, but Devki, overwhelmed and distraught, avoids him. Even so, DK manages to hand her his card as a last option. The next morning, a man walking his dog discovers Arya lying weak in a drainage ditch. As soon as Devki hears the news, she rushes to the hospital. When she sees Arya covered in injuries, she can no longer hold back her tears. The doctor explains that Arya is in critical condition after what appears to be an attempted murder. He also confirms that she has suffered severe physical abuse, leaving Devki completely shattered and overwhelmed with grief. Meanwhile, news about the attack and abuse suffered by Arya spreads quickly across the media. A police officer named Matthew is assigned to handle the case, and he immediately visits Devki at the hospital to take her official statement. In the middle of it, Devki receives a call from Anand and breaks down again, begging him to come home as soon as possible. Even as everything falls apart, Devki stays by Arya's side, caring for her with love, despite Arya continuing to treat her coldly. When Devki gently asks Arya to name the attackers, Arya responds with anger and tears. Instead of opening up, she blames Devki for everything that happened. In her mind, it all started because Devki publicly humiliated Mohit at school. Elsewhere, Sapna is questioned by Matthew, but her testimony provides no real help. Then a breakthrough finally comes when Arya reveals the names of the attackers. Matthew moves quickly, heading to a nightclub to arrest Charles and Mohit. Baburao, the parking attendant, is also taken into custody, and under pressure he reveals the name of another accomplice, Jagan. Matthew soon tracks Jagan down and arrests him at his home. Not long after, the case goes to trial. The prosecutor argues that Arya's testimony and medical condition should be enough to convict them, even without additional evidence. But the judge refuses, insisting on forensic proof and supporting witnesses. Mohit's friends take the stand and give false testimonies. The car used in the crime has already been cleaned, leaving no fingerprints behind. Piece by piece, the case begins to fall apart. Anand is devastated by how unfair the system feels. He argues that the victim's statement alone should be enough, but the court relies only on physical evidence that can easily be manipulated. The situation worsens when a doctor reports negative forensic results, since too much time has passed and no biological evidence can be found. In the end, the judge declares all 4 suspects not guilty, and they are released. That decision completely shatters Anand and his family. Overwhelmed with anger, Anand lashes out in the courtroom and is briefly detained before being released. Outside, they meet Matthew, who is just as frustrated by the outcome. At that moment, Devki makes a quiet but firm decision. She no longer believes in the police or the law. On the way home, Anand receives a call saying Arya has locked herself inside her room. Fearing the worst, they rush back and force the door open. Inside, Devki carefully removes a pair of scissors from Arya's trembling hands. Arya, still overwhelmed, pushes Devki away and refuses her presence, leaving Devki heartbroken once again. Later, after Arya falls asleep from emotional exhaustion, Anand holds Devki close and reminds her that they cannot give up, not for Arya. In the following days, while dropping Priya off at school, Devki unexpectedly sees Mohit back to his normal routine, attending classes as if nothing ever happened. She immediately reports this to the principal, unable to hide her disappointment. Mohit continues living his life without consequences, while Arya is left dealing with deep trauma. As Devki leaves the office, she runs into Mohit. He looks at her with a bold, almost challenging expression. Devki is filled with rage, but she forces herself to stay calm. Later, from inside her car, she notices Mohit skipping school and decides to follow him. Her emotions spiral out of control, and in a moment of anger, she even tries to run him over. But at an intersection, she narrowly avoids a collision with a truck and loses track of him. Not long after, while searching through her bag, Devki finds DK's business. With no other options left, she decides to meet him. Through his CCTV system, DK notices her arrival and lets her into his office. Devki asks for his help in gathering information about the 4 attackers. DK agrees and begins investigating, eventually tracking Baburam's movements all the way to a train station. When DK reports back, Devki finally admits her true intention. She wants revenge. She knows it is wrong, but the pain and injustice she feels push her forward anyway. The next day, Devki secretly meets her former student Vara and asks for her help. Without hesitation, Vara agrees. That night, Baburam is seen drunk, stumbling through a quiet street. He spots a woman alone and approaches her without suspicion, unaware that he has just walked straight into a carefully planned trap set by Devki and Vara. Sometime later, Baburam wakes up near his home, confused and disoriented. His wife is furious, yelling at him for disappearing for 3 days. Annoyed, Baburam pushes her aside and goes into the bathroom. But in an instant, everything changes. He realizes something has been done to him, and panic takes over. He screams and loses control, collapsing in the bathroom. Not long after, he dies from a severe head injury. Sometime later, Arya learns about Baburam's death through the news. Hearing that he was found in such a horrifying condition, she remains silent, staring blankly ahead, her thoughts clearly overwhelmed. The scene then shifts to Matthew, who begins to suspect that Baburam's death is an act of revenge. He questions Anand, but Anand firmly denies any involvement, even though he admits that Baburam deserved punishment for what he did. With no solid leads, Matthew leaves, but he orders his team to keep Anand under surveillance. Elsewhere, Devki meets DK at an art gallery, where he discreetly hands her a USB drive. Back at home, Devki reviews its contents and discovers detailed information about Charles, who regularly parties at a club every Saturday night, and Mohit, who turns out to be Charles's cousin. The two are very close and often spend time together. She also learns that Charles is obsessed with fitness and frequently takes supplements. As Devki watches the footage, she eats an apple. Then, almost instinctively, she spits out the seeds. In that moment, a new idea forms in her mind. Without hesitation, she begins cutting more apples, carefully collecting every single seed. Meanwhile, Matthew's assistant has been closely monitoring Anand for 3 days but finds nothing suspicious. All the attention is focused on Anand, allowing Devki to move freely without raising any alarms. When Devki leaves the house, the assistant does not think much of it and fails to report it. Devki heads to Charles's house with the help of a locksmith, paying him after he opens the door. Wearing gloves, she enters quietly and disables the CCTV cameras to avoid being recorded. She then makes her way into Charles's private gym and carefully mixes the crushed apple seed powder into his supplement bottle. The next morning, Charles casually drinks the supplement while watching a boxing match. Not long after, his vision starts to blur and his body becomes difficult to control. He struggles to breathe as panic sets in. Within moments, his condition worsens, and he collapses, foam forming at his mouth. At the same time, Mohit receives news that Charles has been hospitalized and rushes to see him. As Mohit leaves his apartment building, Devki takes the opportunity to sneak inside. A security guard notices her, but she quickly pretends to be on a phone call and convinces him she is there to meet someone, allowing her to pass without suspicion. At the hospital, doctors inform Matthew that Charles has been poisoned with cyanide derived from apple seeds. However, the poison causes paralysis instead of death. For a brief moment, Matthew suspects Anand, but his assistant reassures him that Anand has not been involved in anything suspicious. While the situation unfolds, Devki moves forward with the next phase of her plan. She deliberately triggers a fire alarm in Mohit's apartment building. When Mohit receives the alert, he rushes back along with Matthew, only to find there is no actual fire. Sensing something is off, Matthew decides to search the apartment. Soon after, the police uncover drugs in Mohit's bathroom. They also find peeled apples without seeds, along with cyanide powder and internet searches about how to make poison from apple seeds. All the evidence points directly to Mohit, exactly as Devki had planned. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Mohit continues to deny everything and resists arrest. But the police take him into custody anyway. During the arrest, Matthew notices a pair of glasses left behind on a table, glasses that belong to Devki. That is when his suspicion begins to grow. The next day, Devki visits Charles at the hospital and introduces herself as his teacher. When the nurse steps away, Devki approaches him and quietly breaks him down mentally. Charles is terrified but completely helpless. By the time the nurse returns, his condition appears unstable, leaving her confused about what just happened. Devki calmly explains it away, saying he is simply overwhelmed by everything. Back at home, Arya receives a message from a friend containing news about Charles and Mohit. She starts to believe that her father is behind everything. Feeling grateful, she decides to suggest a family vacation to the place she has always wanted to visit. Anand agrees without hesitation, smiling warmly at his daughter. Shortly after, Matthew meets Devki to get her signature on some investigation documents. He notices that she seems uneasy, nervously searching for her glasses. Matthew then hands over a pair that was found in Mohit's apartment, but Devki calmly puts on another identical pair she already has. She tries to stay composed and avoids eye contact, sensing that Matthew is starting to suspect her. Before leaving, Matthew warns her to be careful, especially when it comes to the fourth attacker, Jagan, who is known to be dangerous. Back at home, Anand greets Devki with a sense of relief. Arya has begun to open up, and for the first time in a while, things seem to be improving. Anand reassures Devki that everything will get better and that Arya will eventually heal. Still, Devki cannot shake off the fear planted by Matthew's warning. Not long after, Devki meets DK again. He informs her that Jagan has disappeared and is no longer under his watch. Realizing how serious the situation is, Devki urges him to find Jagan as quickly as possible, especially since the police are starting to grow suspicious of her. She thanks DK for his help, unaware that Matthew has been secretly following her, and overhears their conversation. Soon after, Matthew arrests DK and brings him in for questioning. DK refuses to reveal anything about Devki and even claims he does not know her. At the same time, Matthew's superior arrives and orders DK's release. Matthew resists, convinced that DK has been working with Devki to carry out revenge against the attackers. But without solid proof, he is forced to stand down. In the end, his superior orders him to drop the case and move on to something else. Meanwhile, Jagan visits the hospital to see Charles. He pressures Charles to reveal who set them up. Despite his condition, Charles manages to communicate just enough for Jagan to understand the truth. The person behind everything is Arya's mother. From that moment on, Jagan realizes that Devki has been targeting them all along. He also figures out that DK has been secretly tracking him. Later, when DK calls Devki to share information about Jagan, he suddenly notices Jagan approaching. Devki is about to respond, but Priya calls her, reminding her that the family's about to leave for their planned vacation. Devki quickly ends the call. At that moment, DK comes face to face with Jagan. Without hesitation, Jagan attacks him, takes his phone, and tries to contact Devki. The situation escalates, and in a burst of anger, Jagan shoots DK. Afterward, he carefully wipes away fingerprints and disables the CCTV cameras to cover his tracks. Not long after, Matthew arrives at the scene and finds DK dead. While examining the area, he discovers DK's glasses, which turn out to contain a hidden camera with a memory card. When Matthew reviews the footage, he finally sees the truth. The person who killed DK is Jagan. Before long, Devki and her family return home after their trip. As Anand lights the fireplace, the power suddenly goes out. He heads over to check the electrical panel, only to discover that their housemate has already been killed. At the same time, Jagan appears and immediately shoots Anand. Arya, who is trying to light a candle, suddenly realizes that Jagan is right behind her and panics. Hearing her daughter scream, Devki rushes in, only to be shocked by Jagan's presence inside their home. Jagan attacks Devki without hesitation, while Devki urges Arya to run. He then traps Devki by covering her head with plastic, cutting off her air until she loses consciousness. After that, he goes looking for Arya. Moments later, Devki regains consciousness and desperately searches for her daughter. But before she can react, Jagan strikes her from behind and holds her at gunpoint. Just then, Matthew arrives and shoots Jagan in the leg, leading to a violent struggle between them. Matthew manages to take control of the gun and points it at Jagan. At the same time, Devki also arms herself, both of them now aiming at the same man. Matthew tries to stop Devki, warning her not to shoot because it will only ruin her life. He also tells her that Anand is still alive and has already been taken to the hospital. Devki, overwhelmed with emotion and believing Arya's gone, breaks down completely. Trying to calm her, Matthew carefully hands his gun over to Devki, giving her the chance to face Jagan and bring everything to an end. Unbeknownst to them, Arya has been hiding nearby, witnessing everything her mother has done for her. In that moment, Jagan begs for his life, while Matthew urges Devki to finish it before anyone else arrives. Then Arya finally steps forward, calling Devki her mother for the first time. That single moment changes everything. Devki pulls the trigger and kills Jagan. Soon after, Arya runs to Devki and embraces her tightly. For the first time, she truly understands the depth of a mother's love, the same love she had rejected all this time. She never imagined that Devki would go this far, risking everything just to avenge her. Overcome with emotion, Arya realizes her mistake. She holds Devki even closer, finally accepting her completely, not as a teacher, but as her mother. So the moral of the story is if someone starts buying 10 tons of apples but never eats them, just run. They're not making juice.